We'll call the meeting to order this morning at 9:03 a.m. In the true spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge all those who call this land home now and for thousands of years in the past. May we respect each other and find understanding together and recognize the benefits that this land provides to all of us. A couple of notes before we get going. Councillor Zeenstra is away this week and won't be joining us. Councillor Deputy Reeve Kurbis is joining us virtually. John, if you're able to hear us, just give Candace a chat and she'll raise her hand and let us know when you want to speak to something. That'd be great. We have one time commitment this morning on our agenda. We have a 10 a.m. public hearing. We have two public hearings this morning. Other than that, before you have an agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda at this time? If not, Claus?
I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved for the adoption of the agenda of our Thursday, July 6th County Council meeting. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Moving down, item C, adoption of minutes. County Council meeting minutes, June 15th, 2023. You all have the meeting minutes. Are there any errors, omissions, or any other issues arising from the minutes of our June 15th meeting? Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll call to the adoption of the June 15, 2023 minutes.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved for the adoption of the June 15th, 2023 County Council meeting minutes. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Could move down. Item E, department reports. E1, community services. E1.1, Bylaw 23-019, road closure, sale, and consolidation, first reading. And with that, I will turn it over to our Supervisor of Planning and Development, Hillary Jansen. Hillary, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Council. Today I bring forward to you today for first reading, Bylaw 23-019, which is a road closure application by Prune and Bloom Farms. They have applied to close a portion of Township Road 10-0 just south of Highway 3 and to consolidate, purchase and consolidate that land into their existing titles that they currently have. As you can see on the map in front of you, the Township Road is currently being farmed. There's an irrigation pivot that runs right through this particular road right away. When Prune Farms purchased this property, they put on that irrigation pivot. We're unaware at the time that there was a road right away there. In looking at, actually we did their subdivision for this particular title just a few weeks ago. I had noted that there was this right of way that they could consolidate and kind of rectify this particular encroachment issue, and they were amicable towards that and have submitted their application. So with that, we did look at, I sent this application to the internal departments and Alberta Transportation. There was no concerns with regards to closure of this particular portion of Township Road 10-0, as it would not form any, would not be required as any part of the county's road network in the future. So with that, I have put forward a recommendation that Bylaw 23-019 be read for the first time. Chairman?
Thank you, Hillary. Are there any questions from council at this time? Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going to the west side, is that undeveloped as well, or is that part of their land title now too?
It is, so currently Township Road going to the west is still an undeveloped road right of way. That one has a few more complications with regards to closure, as there is a utility. Right now there's some power lines that go through there, so we have an endeavor to close that particular one. Right now it's being used as grazing land, and I do believe that portion we have license to them historically. So that one could be used as a road right of way in the future if there was any future subdivision, so we didn't want to approach that one at this time.
Okay. Any other questions? Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move that Bylaw 23-019 be read for the first time.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved the recommendation that bylaw 23-019 be read for a first time. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Hillary. Moving down on our agenda, item E2, Finance and Administration. E2.1, excuse me, Asset Retirement Obligation, ARO, Policy 187. And with that, we have our Director of Finance and Administration, Jennifer Place. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning. I think there's just a technical issue here with John being able to hear. Doug's here. Why he can't hear us? Do you want me to carry on, Mr. Chairman, or
Just having connection or sound issues.
sound issues, it looks like, with John not being able to hear? Okay.
Can you hear us, John?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, we got her now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead when you're ready, Jen.
So the following report is with regards to the asset retirement obligation, which is a PSAB requirement, Public Sector Accounting Standards Board 3280. As part of this process, administration has prepared a policy which is going to stipulate the accounting treatment of the asset retirement obligations so that users of the financial statements can discern information about the county's assets and their end-of-life obligations. So policy has also incorporated not only the standard ARO procedures, including a decision tree to determine accountability scope, but has assigned some roles and responsibilities for the implementation of PSAB 3280. So this regulation must be implemented and included within the December 2023 year-end financial statements. And this is something that has been discussed with the audit committee. KPMG, when they presented to the audit committee, did mention that AROs, we have been aware of it since earlier, I guess late 2022. So just for some background, the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board, Section 3280 for asset retirement obligations was issued originally in August of 2018. The regulation is to be effective for fiscal years ending on or after April of 2022. which means March 31st for, I guess, public bodies that have that April end date, and December 31st for the rest of us. PSAB Section 3280 applies to all public sector entities, including that follow the PSAB regulations. County Administration and Audit Committee, as mentioned, have had this discussion. I'll just kind of go through the policy highlights with council. I did reference other municipalities that already have these policies in place, and they're all very similar in term. I modified, obviously, for the specifics of Lethbridge County, but in research I did, Ontario's a little bit ahead of this, as they were with TCA as well, so they had a lot of policies, and there was a few municipalities within the province that I looked at also. So the objective of the policy is to stipulate the accounting treatment for asset retirement obligations, or AROs, so that the user of the financial report can discern information about these assets and their end-of-life obligations. The principal issues in accounting for AROs is the recognition and measurement of these obligations. Lethbridge County shall account for and report on ARO in compliance with PSAB. So this just goes, the policy just kind of goes through what it applies to, a breakdown of AROs, that we will utilize existing laws and regulations to determine the ARO liabilities. Provided some definitions there around some of the terminology within the policy. On page 3, we get into more of the procedures as far as what liabilities will be recognized, what the reporting standards are, etc. And I'm just going to direct you to page 5, which is the decision tree and the scope of accountability. And this particular decision tree was standard across the board with the policies I looked at. And I'm assuming this came from PSAB somewhere along the way as well. And it just kind of directs you. I don't know if council remembers some years ago, the Public Sector Accounting Board implemented the contaminated sites, which was PSAB 3260, I believe. We have not recorded any contaminated sites based on the requirements at this time, but we will have some asset retirement obligations. And I brought a bunch of information. I'm not sure how detailed council wants me to get, but an example would be asbestos. So we'll look at the regulations and legislation around building years, dates, and times, determine whether or not this building, as an example, would have asbestos, and then what that obligation would be for the county. So we know that at some point, due to maybe a renovation or decommissioning of the building or selling of the building, there may be a requirement there with regards to asbestos, as an example. So that's basically what this is doing. So it will show up as a liability on the financial statements once all the assets have been reviewed. Currently, just for council's information, there is funds in the budget for the ARO, which we had approved for the 2023 budget. Myself, the infrastructure department, including Mike Bly, who's GIS and asset management, have already met with an engineering company. We're just kind of in the talks, and they're going to help us determine not only which assets would apply to this, but how to calculate the liability, because obviously there's calculations related to asbestos, or if we had asbestos pipes, or other contaminants that we may need to look at. So as long as they are within that legislation, we'll have to record them. So that is kind of a quick summary of what asset retirement looks like, and the PSAB obligation that we have with regards to the books. We'll also work with the auditors in adding that obligation.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jen. Any questions from council?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that it'll show up as a liability in our financials. So will our year end then look like we're, losing money or expensing out, or does it stay still somewhat removed from the budget itself?
Councillor Van Essen, through the chair, it will show up on the asset side of things. So from what I understand, it is kind of a more complicated standard. Even when we were talking with the engineer, she said she's even heard there's changes coming forward, possibly in the works for it. My understanding is, and of course I'd have the auditors confirm this, is that the liability will show up against the asset. So if we were to sell this building and we knew that there was a $100,000 asbestos liability, if we sold this building, that would go against our proceeds on that if we didn't make the correction ourselves. So it won't impact our budget or cash flows in that sense.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, so in a case like that, there could potentially be some sites that are, have a negative net worth, I guess you could say, and will show up as just a plain liability to the county's assets then?
It's a possibility. You know, probably like the fuel pumps at the Public Works Yard is another one that we'll have to consider in that area. So there's possibilities there depending on the age of the asset, the remaining life of that asset, if we've done any upgrades or maintenance that have gone against that liability. So if we've already done renovations here and we know that 50% of the asbestos has already been looked after, then that would kind of mitigate that liability.
Okay, and finally, and I think you had that in there, but there's no obligation to take action on any of this for the foreseeable future?
Not that I'm aware of, like as far as financial planning, and
Right.
no, they have not mentioned that, but I guess it's just an awareness that we know that this is out there and we have an obligation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, John.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we've talked about this before, but in terms of any legislation pending that is going to impact us in the sense of having to put money aside and specifically designated for any retirement obligations, has there been any change on that, or is there any whispers or information coming down the pipe as to whether or not that's going to come into play?
Thank you, Councillor Kurbis, through the chair. At this time, there isn't. I think it's going to be similar to TCA. I think at some point the government is going to want to see that there is efforts being made, but at this time they're not stipulating that you have to, no.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions, comments at this time? Claus?
I'll move that the asset retirement obligation policy number 187 be approved.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved the recommendation that asset retirement obligation policy number 187 be approved. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Move down, item E3, public operations, E3.1, Shaughnessy Wastewater Lagoon desludging expense. With that, we have our Director of Public Operations, Jeremy Wixon. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Council. Sorry, now I'm having technical issues. It just kicked me out of my agenda item. There we go. So this morning, I'm here to discuss Shaughnessy wastewater lagoons. So they were recently assessed through a third-party hydrological survey that estimated the amount of sludge buildup within the lagoons. Now, with that, we did test. One of the things that I put into 2023's budget was I had put in a specific budget just for hydrological survey of all of the wastewater lagoons we have in all of our hamlets. I was talking too loud? Okay. Anyway, we went around, we did these hydrological surveys on all the wastewater lagoons to essentially assess and benchmark essentially where they're at. With some of the newer ones, obviously we had better results, but Shaughnessy specifically was one that we had flagged through this evaluation process. So the main collection cells are currently over capacity and the lagoon system is not operating as designed. And if you go through the technical report, which is below, you'll see the level of sludge that's within the two cells, and they're basically the ones that are in the heavy red color. So within the operational budget was not allocated for the cleaning in 2023, and this was a portion now that we're essentially looking at, and this would incur additional operating expenses. This work would need to be completed prior to the planned capital wastewater upgrades in the hamlet scheduled for 2024. So infrastructure has upgrades scheduled for the hamlet in 2024, and that involves a lot of the wastewater lines as well as some work in and around the sewage lagoons, because we also have some, the vault transfer structure needs to be rebuilt. So for the reasons for the recommendation, an internal assessment of wastewater lagoons was identified as a level of service requirement for ongoing hamlet operations. Every hamlet wastewater lagoon was assessed in the spring for sludge buildup versus the original design. They go out there with a little skiff. I think they're pretty brave to go out there myself. Shaughnessy was identified as in need of immediate attention for the wastewater collection lagoons as the sludge buildup was significant. The Shaughnessy hamlet upgrades are scheduled for 2024, as I spoke to, and this would be required prior to that work being done. Just providing a little bit of background information as well, the utility department operates wastewater lagoons at each of our hamlets. The lagoon cells were previously not analyzed for desludging requirements, which prompted a budget for the evaluation in 2023. Each lagoon was surveyed by a third-party contractor, and recommendations were developed around maintenance requirements for each. Shaughnessy was the only area of concern with the remaining hamlet lagoons operating efficiently. So we will now probably do the hydrological survey on these for Bill and I will discuss probably for another 5-10 year term. The testing parameters are in accordance with the Alberta Government Code of Practice for wastewater systems using a wastewater lagoon. So the alternatives, potentially, the desludging delay could affect the 2024 Shaughnessy capital upgrades if we don't get this work done prior to that happening. And as far as the financial impact, the estimated cost for the contract sludge disposal is about $200,000 to $250,000. I can't say specifically. We did not get a specific quote. We based this off of the town of Picture Butte is during some desludging themselves of their own lagoon. So we based that off of some of the pricing and the volumes that they had from their recently quoted contract. This could be expensed in two ways. So potentially this could be a transfer from the utility reserve currently to cover those expenses, or as part of what we do in our annual budget process is anything that we have as far as a surplus goes into the capital reserve annually. And this would reduce then the year-end transfer. And for the recommendation I have before you today is that council approves an additional operating expenditure budget of $200,000 to $250,000 from the utility reserve for wastewater lagoon desludging. Or alternatively, like I said, it could be just considered a non-transfer this year.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Any questions for Jeremy? Go ahead, Klaus.
Approximately how many gallons of sludge do you have there?
I knew this was going to come up. If you refer to page 12 on the agenda item, it shows the height and the level that's included. And then if you move down to the quantity amounts, cell 1 volumes are on page 16. And the total estimated sludge to be removed wet is 352 cubes, and the total estimated volume of sludge to be removed that's dry, 25 cubes. Now the application process for this, and this would potentially give us good lead time, any of this sludge would essentially have to be applied. There's two options. Either it can be dried and it goes to a landfill, or it can be wet and then it's applied on local fields. And then it's got to meet all kinds of different environmental requirements. Go ahead.
So the cost of this is basically has a lot to do with how far you got to transport it.
Well, the volume of the application is significant, and they have to treat it. I mean, it goes through like almost like a giant centrifuge, essentially. So there's a lot of equipment that they mobilize in to essentially treat this before it can actually be field applied.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So two things. First off, could you tell me why 1 and 2 are so small in comparison to 3 and 4? Is that normal? Like when you look at other ones, they don't seem to be that much of a difference in size.
This is a 40-year-old design, so I cannot really speak to, I mean, this is very old standards for these two that were essentially there. Even the fact that that these are essentially in a coulee draw, I'm sure by today's standards, that would never be approved.
And just to follow up, would the sludge removal procedure sounds like be identical to what the city of Lethbridge does? You just haul it out and put it on land and incorporate it?
Yes, you're correct. Currently, right now, they're applying just off of Highway 25 north of the city, and that's coming. Doing that same thing. They're doing a land application, except for they did that in the spring before crop growth.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jeremy? Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would there be any cost savings to have this done at the same time as upgrades?
This work would have to be done prior to upgrades. So the one thing that we are looking at as part of this is to basically put out an RFP. If the work can be done this fall, that would be the ideal, because then that gives us lead time leading into the transfer station upgrades. Or this could be done in the spring potentially. So does this fall within the realm of the capital project portion? This is more of an operating expense versus a capital expense.
Good, cool.
Yeah, Councillor Van Essen through the chair, because of the unique nature of the work, we don't feel that there's any economies of scale to bundling this with the capital work. We're limited on the vendors that can actually provide the service, and so it doesn't really, even though it's related to the upgrades, it is unique in the process and what needs to be done here. So yeah, we don't feel that there would be any cost savings by doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Good, Klaus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you explain a little bit the drying procedure if you have to go that route? How would that go and where would you store it?
That would be, I'd have to refer to the contractor. I have never actually seen the drying process, or never gone through that. I've only ever dealt with the wet sludge removal.
Any other questions? Mark?
I'd like to move that council approve an additional operating expenditure budget of $200,000 to $250,000 from the utility reserve for wastewater lagoon desludging.
Thank you, Mark. Mark has moved the recommendation that council approves an additional operating expenditure budget of $200,000 to $250,000 from the utility reserve for wastewater lagoon desludging. Is there any further discussion? Good, Cole, and then Eric.
Councillor Sayers, through the chair, can we just clarify that resolution to say an upset amount of $250,000? We don't know exactly where it'll come in, and then that gives the flexibility to adjust based on what the tenders.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Essen?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Could finance expound a little bit on where we could pull this from? Was there not another option on whether it was and why it's a good idea to take it out of our operating budget versus the other option?
Currently, it's coming out of the utility reserve, is what the motion that Mark made.
Okay, and what was the alternative?
The alternative was basically we do a transfer of our surplus into capital at the end of the year. I think right this year we got budgeted $600,000 to $700,000 is essentially what we forecasted. But whatever we have essentially as a surplus at the end of the year within the utilities budget basically goes towards capital improvements as a transfer to reserves to capital improvements. So this would just reduce that amount.
So either it goes around the one way or it goes around the other way?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just saves me one entry versus the other.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Mark has moved that council approve an additional operating expenditure budget of up to $250,000 from the utility reserve for wastewater lagoon desludging. Does that work, Mark? Any further discussion? If not, I'll call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, council.
Item E4, infrastructure, E4.1, Malloy Drain Phase 2B, additional ACRP funding request. And with that, we have our Director of Infrastructure, Devin Teely. Good morning, Devin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Council. So the Malloy Drain Steering Committee met on June 23rd to receive an update from the Technical Committee regarding the status of the project. An overview of the project was presented to the committee, including how the project has evolved since the last phase was completed. A couple key items noted in the update included a revised cost estimate, which indicates a significant increase in projected costs since the original estimate was completed in 2017. As well, a revision of the original scope of work was presented due to cost increases projected. The Town of Coaldale, as the managing partner, has drafted a letter to the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, Rebecca Schultz, and that's included in the agenda. Included in this letter is a request to the province to increase their commitment to the project from $1.238 million to $4,445,850. This also includes a commitment from the partners funding. This increases the partners' funding commitment and demonstrates that all three parties are willing to increase their contribution if the province does the same. And that increase is currently $600,000 from $285,550. And I will note that $285,000 was the original estimate, but throughout the years as this project got delayed, I did increase the amount in the budget, so we actually have $340,000 in the budget currently for this project. As I indicated, the request for scope reduction has been submitted to the grant administrators to lessen the financial burden of the project. The scope reduction would essentially exclude the construction of the pond near Cottonwood. The project will still result in about 500,000 cubes of storage, and by utilizing the existing abandoned raw water reservoirs in the town of Coaldale. The intent with removing the south pond would be to use this area as a source of fill material for developers in Coaldale, which would almost eliminate the costs associated with constructing a pond. So basically that pond would be slowly dug by developers in Coaldale as fill material, as a source of material for them to build out their developments and kind of creating a pond at the same time. The increase in cost can be attributed to a few items. The cost estimate in which the funding was based upon, as I mentioned, was in 2017, which is now 6 years old. The cost estimate did not include engineering services, as the intent at the time was to have the town of Coaldale complete the engineering on this project. But due to reasons outside anyone's control, the town is no longer in that position, and we need to retain an engineer to do this for us. And lastly, land costs have also significantly increased since 2017, resulting in increased costs to all three parties. So the recommendation I have before you today is that Council approve the REE's signature on the attached letter of support to Minister Schultz, and to approve an additional, that should read 260,000, not 240, apologies, that's a typo, 260,000 in funds towards the project for a total of $600,000, contingent on receiving an additional $4,445,850 from the province. The reason for the recommendation is the committee feels that increasing the funding commitment of all three parties increases the chances of receiving additional funds from the province. If the request is not successful, the county's commitment would remain at $340,000. An alternative, of course, you do not have to commit to any additional funding. This would maintain the county's current financial commitment. However, it would most likely lessen the chances of us receiving additional funding from the province. I'll also note in the financial impact, I also have a typo in there as well. 360,000 should be 340,000, as I mentioned previous, as that's the current budget. And with that, I will put it back to council.
Thank you, Devin. Open it up to council for questions or discussion. Klaus?
This project, whole project got approved, before I was in council already, I guess. And, why is it taking so long to get this project done? Is that because of the funding that is necessary and the grants, or?
A couple reasons for that. From what I understand, it took longer than Coaldale anticipated to procure the land. And going back to my earlier comment where the town of Coaldale planned on doing the engineering on this, and we wouldn't, the intent was for them to do the design, contract admin, all of that stuff. The person that they had in line for that is no longer able to do that, and we were hoping that we would be able to do that, which delayed the project, but now we're at the point where we know for sure that we can't go that route anymore, have to hire a consultant, so that's a couple reasons for the delays.
When do you expect the project to be done?
To be done, it's really all contingent on receiving additional funding. If we're able to get more funding from the province, then we can probably get going on this sooner than later, but if we don't, then we have to meet, or the committee has to meet again and decide how we move forward with a rather substantial funding gap.
And maybe Devin or Lauren could speak to this. Lauren and I are both on the steering committee, but the overall project, it was always intended to be a phased project with some of the more critical work taking place sooner on, opening up the drain itself physically, making the drain bigger towards Stafford, and then moving back towards the town. And I think it's fair to say that the higher priority projects were checked off the list first, and we're kind of moving towards the end. Is that fair, Devin?
Yeah, we're working at the downstream end, obviously enlarging canals to accommodate additional flows. You got to work from the bottom stream end up. So yeah, we completed phase 1, phase 2A, and now 2B is just the next one in that plan to create more stormwater retention in that area.
Eric, and then Lauren?
Thank you. Just sitting on the sidelines, trying to read what I can find in here. I see some of our cost escalations are Coaldale oopsies or accidental things they could not control. And in a lot of ways, it appears that the portions regarding the county are either completed or definitely well underway. Yeah, I'm struggling to find our commitment requirement in this further for that final leg, unless it's really, yeah, maybe that could be touched on a little further, I guess.
Regarding the county's commitment overall in the project, is that?
No, more regarding our obligation of why to keep dumping into it further.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of looks like the storage pond can be dug by contractors as required, some of those kind of things. Yeah, I don't see I don't have the appetite at this point to say, yeah, let's go put more into this. What's our return on it?
And I'll try to speak to that a little bit. I guess the intent when this first came along was for the three parties, because, I mean, County and Coaldale are in the heart of that kind of dished area where there's significant stormwater issues, and SMRID is the only means to get rid of that water. So it was decided years ago, not necessarily on paper, that all three parties would come together and work on this 10-year implementation plan. Understanding that some projects may benefit other parties more than the other, but at the end, we're all benefiting partners in this. We can reduce flooding in the county and Coaldale, and SMRID can help us by basically facilitating a conveyance system to get rid of that stormwater. So like I said, there was nothing, on paper agreeing that we'll do this for all 10 phases, but in good faith, it was kind of agreed to that we would continue as all three partners and work towards stormwater management in and around the Coaldale area.
Lauren, and then John?
Thank you. Just to answer a little bit more on Eric's question, I think when you looked at the history of it, Coaldale is the low spot, and the Malloy drain that kind of existed before was built in the actual Malloy Lake and drained the water from Coaldale and areas out to Stafford Reservoir. So, but the problem was the water was ponding up in Coaldale, and it was all coming from the west and the north of Coaldale. So this was kind of a plan to get rid of that excess water and move it along. Now, it has helped a great deal. The improvements have been made up to date, but there's still some bottlenecks, especially west and south of Coaldale. And definitely there are some more up to the north, but with this, it should help it drastically to improve that situation.
I'll just maybe add to that. Thanks, Reeve, or Councillor Hickey. One thing that it'll also help upon completion of these 10 phases is it'll reduce the burden on developers and their stormwater requirements. So right now, they're very restricted in that Malloy Basin as to what they can do and the amount of stormwater they have to capture. Upon upgrades, that burden will be lessened, resulting in less expensive developments, or I guess less burden on the developers that want to develop in that area, which may facilitate additional development because they're not held to such stringent standards. But all 10 of those phases need to be completed in order for us to get to that point.
Good. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just, there was quite a bit of discussion at the meeting about moving back towards Lethbridge, how perhaps it would be feasible in the future to put storm ponds or water retention ponds on property between Lethbridge and Coaldale to stop the flow or help the flow of water coming into Coaldale. And then that water could be either pumped into the system at a later date or used to irrigate with. So that was fairly heavily discussed. One other thing, it's the engineering, when you talked about the town of Coaldale no longer being able to do it, was it ever sent out to tender, or did it just automatically go to MPE?
For the upcoming phases, the next phases, I believe it was treated as a continuation of previous phases, and MPE was granted the work as a continuation, basically, because they've been involved since pretty much inception of the Malloy Drain implementation plan.
Deputy Reeve Curvis, John, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's sort of along the same lines as Councillor Van Essen's questions and concerns. As I'm reading this, unless I'm mistaken, it appears that we're sort of stepping up to the plate because one of the other partners is not meeting the initial commitments. And I have some sort of some reservations and concerns with the fact that if this is a partnership agreement with the other municipalities and the other players on this, and that they step away from their commitment, that we're automatically picking it up, I guess would be my major concern.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to speak to that. Initially, all three parties' funding commitment was the same. The town of Coaldale didn't ask for a reduce in their funding commitment because they were doing the engineering. They were gonna kind of do that free of charge to the group. So everybody's commitment, as I said, was the same. They were gonna do it free of charge. So to try and reduce our commitment now because they're not doing it, I don't know if that would be necessarily fair to the town because they were gonna do it free of charge to the group anyway. If that makes sense, Councillor Curbis?
Not really, because if they had said that, okay, they were gonna do that, but now they can't, are we saying that we're picking up the full burden of them not being able to do it now, or is it being divided up amongst all of the partners?
Oh, okay, I understand. It's divided up between all the partners. And I would also say that the majority of the cost increases are due to basically a 6-year-old estimate and grants from 4 or 5 years ago, and the cost escalations that we've been seeing since then. That's the majority of the increase in costs. Engineering is definitely significant, but not nearly as significant as what we've seen in increased costs over the past 4 or 5 years.
Perfect, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any further discussion? Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What happens if not? If we don't fund it, don't change?
If we don't increase our commitment,
Yeah.
I would say there's just a lesser chance that the province would increase their commitment. If the three partners are unwilling to, then they might say, well, we're not going to give you any more money either if you're not willing to spend more. It was presented by the town of Coaldale as a way to show that we're still working towards this project. We're committed to it. We're going to put in more money if you guys do as well. That was the idea behind it.
So if we commit to it and the province doesn't come to the table, the whole thing is still on hold anyway. Is that correct?
Correct. this is contingent on the province coming to the table. This increase in funding that we're asking for
Yeah.
is contingent on them coming to the table and increasing their funding. If they don't, our commitment remains at 340,000 as in the budget.
Okay, and then still to what happens if province doesn't come forward, we don't go forward, then the final phase of 2B just sits on the shelf until funds are available and people get flooded, or is there a direct risk?
That'll have to be brought back to the steering committee. If we aren't able to get those funds, we'll probably come back to the steering committee, say, you know, here's some options, what's the direction you want to go in, and then we'd get direction from the steering committee, and kind of like what I'm doing today, come back to council with that, whatever the request may be.
And then finally, I'd like to put out there that I don't want to jump off the ship just because our portion is completed. If our beneficiary part is done, and we say, yeah, okay, we've benefited, and now I want to jump off. I just want to be confident that we're not going above and beyond for add-ons and late additions that we were not originally planning on or scheduled for.
Thanks, Eric. Go ahead, Klaus, and then Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think it's always a risky business if you plan a big project like this and so many years go over it, and then with the inflation and the cost of that, it's probably a no-brainer that this is going to be way more than they originally expected to be paying for this project, and I don't think it would be fair for the county to leave Coaldale hanging there and have destruction of parts of the town and stuff like that. So I think, like it or not, I think I would support the recommendation.
Thanks, Klaus. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would move that council approve the Reeve signature on our letter of support to Minister Schultz and the approval of additional funding of $240,000 to a total of $600,000?
Correct.
Correct number?
Are we going 260, Devin?
Or sorry, 260,000, sorry, there's a typo
No,
in that
260
recommendation.
towards a total commitment of 600,000?
That's right.
Okay.
And can I just maybe want to add in $260,000 in funds from the Public Works Project Reserve? Just
And
to
then still
clarify.
that contingent element as well?
Correct. Contingent, yeah.
From the, sorry, what was it, Devin? Public?
Public Works Project Reserve. Sorry, I missed that, putting it in there.
You happy with that, Lauren?
I think, is there one other part we should add in?
Yeah, so.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Councillor Hickey, it would be our recommendation that we make this contingent on receiving the additional RCAP funding from the province. And then to Councillor Van Essen's point, if we don't receive that funding, then we can bring it back for discussion around timelines, commitment, and everything else, rather than the county being committed for a certain dollar amount that will not fulfill the obligations of Phase 2B, and we're further in than we maybe want to be, or that might not be the strategy moving forward. So, yeah, it would be our administration's recommendation that we still make that contingent on receiving the RCAP funding.
Thank you, Cole. Any further discussion? Lauren has moved that council approve the Reeve signature, sorry, on the letter of support to Minister Schultz, and to approve an additional $260,000 in funds towards the project for a total of $600,000, contingent on receiving an additional $4,485,850 from the province. Does that work? Does that capture it, Devin?
Did you have the Public Works Project Reserve?
Oh, sorry. To be funded from the Public Works Project Reserve.
Perfect.
Okay. Any further discussion? Thanks for bringing this forward, Devin. It was good to finally have a steering committee meeting. Hadn't had one in a long time, and it was good to sit down with a group. And I think the overall project is a huge success story. I think the county, the town of Coaldale, the SMRID always haven't been on the best of terms. So I think this was a real turning point in all of our relationships. And I think it's a really positive success story that, you know, quite frankly, we hear about throughout the province, us being able to get this done and move forward. So I'm glad to see this recommendation. Any further discussion? Not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you, Council.
It's 9:53. We do have a public hearing slated for 10 a.m. So why don't we take a short recess until then, and we will reconvene with our first public hearing at 10 a.m. Thank you. 9:01 a.m. this morning. We do have 2 public hearings this morning. So with that, I will recess our regular meeting. We are here today to hold the public hearing for Bylaw 23-014, road closure, sale, and consolidation. I would ask for a motion to open the public hearing. Holy, all of you. Clause is moved to open the public hearing for Bylaw 23-014, road closure, sale, and consolidation. The public hearing is being held, oh, sorry, I should call the question. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The public hearing is being held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act as amended. This public hearing is being live streamed via the county's YouTube page. The public hearing for Bylaw 23-014 is now officially open. I will now ask the Supervisor of Planning and Development to review the nature of this hearing and provide an overview of what is being proposed. With that, I'll throw to Hillary. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Council. So the public hearing for this public hearing is for Bylaw 23-014, and it is to for Council to determine whether or not they wish to send this particular road closure application to the Minister of Transportation for their final approval. This particular application was first brought forward to County Council on June the 1st of 2023, and it was to close a portion, or to close Township Road 9-4A, being the sole access road to the McCain Foods facility on the very east side of Lethbridge County. The road, the applicant had requested to close this road as they wish to put some infrastructure in the road right-of-way, including their scales, and they want to be able to have full control and maintain that particular infrastructure as part of their growth of their, or the expansion of their facility. In looking at this application, county administration did determine that the road was not required as part of the county's future road network, and Alberta Transportation also approved in principle the closure of this particular road as long as all the adjacent titles would be consolidated into one property and there would be no individual parcel that would require access in the future. McCain's has committed to consolidating all the properties together so that it would be one cohesive parcel in the future. With regards to the notice, this application was advertised in the June 13th and 20th editions of the Sunny South News. The county did not receive any comments or concerns from any of the adjacent landowners nor the MD of Tabor with regards to the proposed road closure. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll put it back to you.
Thank you, Hillary. This is Council's opportunity to receive input from the public. Those making presentations are asked to state their name and review their points. We ask you to refrain from asking questions to Council. The intention of the public hearing is not to debate or defend the contents of the bylaw or the position which individual councillors may have on the bylaw. Questions asked of a councillor by a presenter may be ruled out of order. Presentations to Council will start with the applicant who has made a submission, followed by any other persons wishing to comment on the proposal. After each speaker, members of Council will be permitted to ask questions. I feel like this probably doesn't pertain to this, but I will move down. As there is no one, there isn't an applicant to speak to this, I don't believe.
No, nobody is here present to speak towards the application.
Okay, so I would ask, is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? And I'll ask a third time, is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? If there's nothing further, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Lauren?
I would move to close public hearing for bylaw 23-014.
Thank you, Lauren. Lauren has moved to close the public hearing for bylaw 23-014. Is there any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And now to the recommendation. How would you like to proceed, Council? Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move that bylaw 23-014 be sent to the Minister of Transportation for approval.
Thank you, Mark. Mark has moved the recommendation that bylaw 23-014 be sent to the Minister of Transportation for approval. Is there any further discussion? Not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank
We have
you.
our second public hearing. Again, recess our regular meeting. We are here today for the public hearing for bylaw 23-018, to reconfigure the land use districts for portions of Northwest 211120 west of the 4 and Plan 18103343 Block 1 Lot 1. I'd ask for a motion to open the public hearing. Clause. Clause is moved to open the public hearing for bylaw 23-018. Is there any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Public hearing is being held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act as amended. This public hearing is being live streamed via the county's YouTube page. The public hearing for bylaw 23-018 is now officially open. With that, I will ask the Supervisor of Planning and Development to review the nature of the hearing and provide an overview of what is being proposed. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just pull up the map so that this one is easier to follow with regards to what's being proposed. So with regards to this particular rezoning application, it is essentially a reconfiguration of 3 hamlet zones within these 3 titles. Currently, there is a very small hamlet residential parcel, a hamlet commercial parcel right on Highway 25, and there is a hamlet industrial parcel that kind of spans the old rail line and station lands within the hamlet of Iron Springs. The applicant wishes to reconfigure these lots as they are looking to make their yard somewhat bigger. Right now, the parcel for the existing yard is 0.23 acres, I do believe, size, and their current septic system is outside of that particular area. And so their plans for this reconfiguration is to eventually potentially build a new residence on the parcel and also to bring their entire residential parcel into compliance. With regards to the reconfiguration, so just on the screen here is kind of how it lays out today. You can see the small residential title, the larger industrial title, and the commercial title. What they are wishing to do is to enlarge their yard and also to make the industrial parcel somewhat usable and to sell off that parcel in the future to a person who wishes to develop upon it. In looking at this application, this proposed reconfiguration of zones within the hamlet of Iron Springs does meet the county's policies within the municipal development plan, specifically Section 9, which deals with hamlets, where policies allow for a range of uses within the hamlet, and the proposal also adheres to the regulations of the land use bylaw, as the residential area would now exceed the minimum 2-acre required area and for an unserviced parcel within a hamlet. This application was advertised in the June 13th and 20th editions of the Sunny South News, and it was also directly mailed to the affected and adjacent landowners within the hamlet, as there would be obviously some changes that would occur, although the uses aren't changing, the area that which they occur would change. We did get one call from an adjacent landowner, a directly adjacent landowner, expressing some concerns with regards to the road access for the industrial parcel being so close to their existing shop building that they have located on the adjacent title. But they did not submit any formal comments in writing. They just expressed that concern over the phone. And in terms of the access, that is probably where the access to the industrial parcel would be, regardless of whether it was a larger or a smaller title, just based off of the current access that exists, because that's one of the accesses to the parcel. So with that, there is the applicant's daughter is here today if there are any questions of council. Christina Penner is here if there's some questions of council. But with that, I will put it back to you, Mr. Chairman, for council's discussion.
Thank you, Hillary. This is council's opportunity to receive input from the public. Those making presentations are asked to state their name and review their points. We ask you refrain from asking questions to council. The intention of the public hearing is not to debate or defend the contents of the bylaw or the position which individual councillors may have on the bylaw. Questions asked of a councillor by a presenter may be ruled out of order. Presentations to council will start with the applicant who has made a submission, followed by any other persons wishing to comment on the proposal. We ask you please keep your comments to the point. After each speaker, members of council will be permitted to ask questions of the presenter to clarify any details. No debating or questions from the floor will be allowed. With that, I would open the floor up if the applicant requests to speak. If not, I will ask, is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? And the third time, is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? If not, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Mark? Mark has moved to close the public hearing for bylaw 23-018. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we can resume our public meeting at 10:12 a.m. this morning. I would open up to council for any questions or any further discussion. Claus, and then Lauren.
I want to move the bylaw 23-018 be read for the second time.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved second reading of bylaw 23-018. Lauren?
Just a question on access. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you said the access road is beside the shop there?
There is
it-
an access there, yes, from the old rail line.
It's on the old rail? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that goes to all 3 lots then for access, or just?
Just, that would be the access through to Councillor Hickey through the chair for the industrial parcel. The residential parcel, I'll bring back the ortho image here. Turn off the planning stuff. So their residents would take, you can see kind of they have a main access already that
Okay.
goes across multiple titles. And then there's this approach here that's leading into the industrial title, which is exactly where the old rail line used to be. So they're not really changing their approaches at this point in
So
time.
is that part of the title that's being amalgamated? Or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was already sent to Alberta Transportation for first reading or so, and they did not comment on the second approach into the off of Highway 25, that removal of it or such.
They requested that any existing approaches be taken out off of Highway 25 in this area. And that would be contingent for the subdivision side, not the rezoning side.
Okay. Okay.
Claus has moved the recommendation that bylaw 23-018 be read a second time. Is there any further discussion? Any questions? If not, I will call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. And third reading. I'd like to consider third reading. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation that bylaw 23-018 be read a third time.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved that bylaw 23-018 be read for a third time. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
And with that, we can move in our agendas to item G, our subdivision applications. G1, subdivision application 2023-0-066, Schapansky Farms Limited. And I'll throw it back to you, Hillary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the first of 3 subdivisions for council's consideration. The first is a first parcel out of a intact quarter section. The applicant wishes to take out a 2.2 acre parcel out of the northeast corner of the quarter section for residential use. They do have an existing dwelling in this particular corner. You can't see it on the air photo. It was just recently constructed. But they wish to sever off that parcel from the agricultural title. This particular parcel is located just to the south, well, 4.5 miles southeast of the town of Coaldale and a mile and a half from Highway 512. And this particular application does meet all the county's subdivision criteria for this subdivision itself. And I'll get Steve Hardy to go through the detailed planning comments and the final recommendation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Council.
Morning, Steve.
This application in front of you, as described, it's the first subdivision out of the quarter section, in that very northeast corner. As Hillary mentioned, it doesn't show up in the photo there, but on the surveyor sketch, you can see here where there's a dwelling sitting on that parcel that's been recently constructed there, so now looking to subdivide that out as a yard title to be on a separate title. It's triangular shaped and size there to account for the irrigation pivot on the remnant quarter section land there. The yard with the dwelling there, it is serviced by private cistern system and individual on-site septic, which is captured. It's just, the septic is just to the southwest there of the dwelling. It'll be within the confines of the subdivided yard once subdivided. And their access there, you see, is on the east side to the east municipal road allowance. And looking at this application, there is a confined feeding operation located just to the north of this. This does meet the required minimum distance separation to that operation, and MDS of 550 meters would be required, and 626 meters exists as measured to the dwelling as required under the bylaw. So it exceeds the distance for that. During the circulation of this application, there's no objections received on it. None of the utility companies require an easement or anything of that nature. So as a first subdivision out of the quarter section, the 2.2 acre parcel size complies with the bylaw, exceeds the 2 acre minimum. I have recommended an approval to you, and that would be just based on the resolution in front of you of the standard conditions that taxes are paid up to date, development agreement entered into if required, and then the third would just be that the final plan of survey to match any approval that you grant, that be provided at the final end. So just be subject to those 3 conditions.
Thank you very much, Steve. Are there any questions from council? Lauren, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Steve, you talked about utilities. Is the irrigation right away, is it still there? Or is it now a pipeline, or is it gone, or?
That was an old irrigation line. Councillor Hickey through the chair, that when they originally looked at this subdivision, we noted that it was still a titled area, and so they worked with the irrigation district to consolidate that particular old irrigation right of way into the agricultural land, because you can see from the air photo there's no irrigation there, so it was just a remnant that had to be dealt with, and so the applicant did that before the subdivision to make sure there was no issues with that. So
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just further to Councillor Hickey's question, often when it happens on the plan, some of those old abandoned ones still show up, because it's often either utility company or the irrigation districts don't go to council the plan at land house because there's cost involved in that, so it's just abandoned, but it still shows up on all the cadastral mapping and that, just because it's left on there even if they have no interest anymore, because they don't go back to unregister it, so to speak, because there's cost involved in that, so it's just abandoned. But it shows up on all the drawings and that, because it's still registered that way.
Thank you, Steve. Any further questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move that subdivision application number 2023-0-066 be approved, subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution.
Thank you, Mark. Mark has Mark has moved the recommendation that subdivision application 2023-0-066 be approved, subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Steve. Moving down in our subdivisions. Sorry. Number 2, subdivision application 2023-0-071. Herget. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This next subdivision is to formally sever the existing quarter section into 2 titles. Currently, as you can see on the map, the southeast 27,720 west of the 4th is on either side of Highway 4. There's a small 12.5 acre title kind of on the north east side of the parcel, and then the remainder of the quarter is obviously on the southwest side of Highway 4 and the CP rail line. So the applicant is requesting that those two titles be formally severed so that they are two distinct titles that they can dispose of or do as they wish in the future. The particular subdivision does meet all the county's criteria with regards to a severance of a title that is split by a public roadway or in another encumbrance. You can also tell, just in terms of location, this particular parcel is located directly to the east of the existing Transmark transloading and rail car storage facility. So that's just some contextual information for your council to notice. And with that, I will put it to Steve for the comments and the recommendation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this next subdivision in front of you is eligible for subdivision consideration under the cutoff fragmented parcel subdivision policies of the land use bylaw. It allows a title that's physically severed by a public roadway or highway, railway, permanent water course, those types of features to be split and create title on either side of that severance. So as described in this case, there's two transportation networks that create the physical severance for the landowner, that being Highway 4 and also the CPR rail line that crosses that northeast corner there, which creates a physical barrier for the owner. As well, obviously the access, they can't directly cross or access. They have to use the local roads and service roads in the area in order to get to either side to the parcels. On this particular land, there are no buildings or improvements located on either of the portions of the quarter section. It's cultivated agricultural land. So with that, there's no need for any potable water or sewer disposal provisions for agricultural cutoff subdivision. The application itself meets the criteria under the cutoff fragmented policy subdivisions. The owners do have a tentative agreement with Transmark for Transmark to possibly purchase that remnant piece for doing expansion of Transmark out there. But any further proposals for that, or if they're to do that, would require separate development processes. Transmark would have to apply to the county to rezone and that sort of a thing. So this application itself is dealt with just at the face value at this part of time as agricultural cutoff subdivision, which it meets the policies for and the parcel sizes for that. As part of the review, there were no objections or concerns received on the application. It did require a referral to verticulture due to historical resource flagged in the area. It's adjacent to Category 5 historical potential archaeological resource. Verticulture responded and said they don't require anything for this subdivision. They're not concerned with it. As well, just due to Highway 4 there and the access, Alberta Transportation was also referred to. They had no concerns with the application, and they authorized the county to grant an approval if you choose to do so. They had no issues or concerns with it. So with that, since the agenda package was circulated out to you just in the last few days, we've heard back from two more utility companies, both Fortis and APCO Transmission. They have no concerns and they do not require any easements. So based on your cutoff fragmented policies and the land use bylaw subdivision criteria, I have recommended an approval to you, the resolution presented to you in front of you. And that would be just on the 3 conditions: taxes are paid up to date, development agreement entered into if required, and that the final plan of survey be provided based on the approval of that.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Hillary. I'd open it up to council for any questions, any further discussion. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do they get access to that piece off of 7-4?
You're the one on the north side of the highway, or the?
Yeah, I know where they get the access on the south. It's
Right.
just that one.
Yeah, there is a bit
There's
of
a little
a
road there, isn't there?
There's a little bit of a
Okay.
road. I'll pull up the map here. Councillor Hickey, through the
Yeah.
chair, you can see there's a bit of a service road that goes there. It's obviously not a well-developed one, but it provides a field access for that title.
Okay, thank you.
Any further? Sorry, go ahead.
I
Lauren.
was just gonna move
Yeah.
the subdivision application 2023-0-071 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft.
Thank you, Lauren. Lauren has moved the recommendation that subdivision application 2023-0-071 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. And moving down, our final subdivision application for today. Item 3, subdivision application 2023-0-054 Penner. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This third subdivision application reflects exactly the rezoning application that council just approved with regards to the reconfiguration of the 3 titles located on this parcel located in the hamlet of Iron Springs. They wish to reconfigure the titles as per the rezoning that was approved so that the hamlet commercial, hamlet residential, and hamlet industrial parcels match the rezoning as submitted today. And it does meet all of the county's criteria for subdivision. Specifically, it meets the parcel size requirements that are contained within the land use bylaw. And with that, I'll get Steve to do the planning comments and the recommendation.
And Mr. Chairman, this last subdivision application for today, as Hillary mentioned, it's still aligned with the previous land use redesignation he dealt with there earlier this morning, so that the property boundaries between the 3 titles there will align with the rezoning. So it kind of involves 3 aspects. The first is to increase the size of the hamlet residential lot from 0.13 to 2.57 acres. That little small triangle piece that was there before obviously was deficient in size, didn't comply with the bylaw. In our historical search of that, going all the way back to the 1940s, we could find no record of that parcel of its creation. It's believed it might have just been when station grounds went in a remnant piece that was kind of left over the way the station grounds were done. And it's existed that way for many years, and that dwelling that's been on there has been on there for many decades also. So part of that is to enlarge the residential yard to rectify an encroachment issue with the septic field because it's situated east of the dwelling and outside the existing small triangle parcel that's there. So this way it'll put it on the same property, which is required with the recent changes a number of years back under the sewage guidelines. There's also a shed that sits on the north property line, and the adjustment will enable it to be set back from the property line also. The second component is that the north commercial lot will be squared off and will be reduced in size to 0.64 acres. That lot there's existing access to Highway 25 there. As part of this application and the referral to Alberta Transportation, and actually discussions with them, Alberta Transportation has decided that they won't require that second access to be closed at this time. They'll just leave it as is, just to do to this application in front of you being a reconfiguration of the 3 existing titles and not creating a new title. And the existing land use situation from what it currently is there between the commercial lot, the residential, and the remnant, the larger industrial piece is not changing. So they said they won't require anything at this time, and they won't require them to close it, and they'll just leave it as is. And just in the future, if a future proposal comes forward, or development proposal that's to change the situation, then they'll review it at that time. And there could be the potential in the future, if something else occurs there, that they would then require that direct access to Highway 25 to be closed. But for now, they're allowing it to remain as is. And then the third component of the application is that eased vacant industrial lot be reconfigured and be reduced in size from 5.71 to 3.86 acres, which still conforms with the bylaw, and just largely due to the residential yard portion being enlarged. This parcel is comprised of a portion of the Hamlet's former CPR railway lands. Access for the realigned east industrial lot, as discussed at the public hearing for rezoning, there will be provided from a 6.1 meter, 20-foot wide panhandle private access that connects west to Center Street. So that portion is not a public road, it's a part of their parcel, so it's their own personal driveway. There's really no other way to get access other than having a driveway, a panhandle connect to Center Street on the west there, due to the former CPR lands, railway lands there, and the way the hamlet developed, and then Highway 25 is kind of boxed in the back there, and with no direct access to Highway 25 allowed for that industrial parcel. There really is no other way to get into access there than out to the West Center Street due to some sort of panhandle for a private driveway. There is a utility line right-of-way registered with industrial lot land for the county's water line that extends east to Turin. That easement will carry over and remain on the title registered to protect the county, so that situation won't change. So with that, during this circulation of this application, on the subdivision, there was no concerns or objections submitted on it, and there's no requests for utility easements by any of the utility agencies. I did indicate on the agenda report that came out, which was done a while back, that Alberta Transportation hadn't commented, but they since have. They both talked to me on the phone, and they also submitted formal comments, just as I described to you, and that they have no concerns with it, and they authorize the county to grant an approval if you saw fit. So with that, I've recommended an approval to you. It complies with the policies to allow a realignment, reconfiguration of titles with no increase in titles. We start with 3 here, we end up with 3. It's just the layout, orientation, and size that's changing between the 3. The realignment allows the land boundaries to be realigned based on the constraints of land use present and the rezoning that occurred just earlier today. So with that, on the draft resolution presented to you, it would be subject to the conditions that any taxes are paid and up to date to the county, and development agreements entered into if the county requires it. And the third important condition is that the portions of land to be consolidated and realigned for the 3 adjacent parcels be done by a plan prepared by Alberta land surveyor in a manner such that resulting titles cannot be further subdivided without approval of the subdivision authority. So a new plan will be registered over top of those 3 based on the new layout.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions to Hillary or Steve at this time? If not, I would entertain a motion. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation that subdivision application 2023-0-054 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved the recommendation that subdivision application 2023-0-054 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much, Hillary. We can move now on our agenda. Item H, correspondence. We have 7 pieces of correspondence today. I will maybe just start off, and then I will throw to Cole on a couple. So our first item of correspondence, H1, we received correspondence from Lethbridge and District Exhibition regarding a request to host the 2023 Whoop Up Days Parade Pancake Breakfast. So last summer, County Council participated and volunteered in helping with the pancake breakfast hosted in the Park Place Mall, scheduled to take place on August 22nd, 2023 at 6:30 a.m. in the Park Place Parking Lot Mall. Lethbridge and District Exhibition would love to continue our partnership with Lethbridge County as we welcome our community to celebrate Southern Alberta as Canada's agriculture destination. Collaboration on the Whoop Up Day Pancake Breakfast would include to provide volunteer support for the 2023 breakfast, collaborate on production of the pancake breakfast, including cooking of the breakfast, and support with the pancake breakfast as required. Thank you for considering this request and expanding our current partnership. We look forward to hearing from you to discuss this request further. I think it was council's intention to continue this year with the pancake breakfast, but I would open it up for any discussion from council. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's, I'd like to support this again. It was a good time, and the only thing is we need one of the pancake shaper thingies.
Yep.
That's it.
I think we need some more tools this year.
Yeah, a couple more tools, and we're ready now.
Okay.
Regulator and the propane tank.
Do we need a motion for that, or can we just communicate? Okay, thank you. Item 2, the Coldell and District Agricultural Society. We received a letter dated June 11th. Attention Reeve, Torrey Campbell, and Lethbridge County Council. In November 2022, I'm skipping out here, or skipping down. In November 2022, it was announced that Lethbridge County Council unanimously voted to contribute $2 million towards the construction of the Lethbridge and District Exhibitions Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center. The Coldell and District Ag Society requests a meeting with the County Council to gain insight into the hub investment and to discuss how the county and our own society may best work to meet the goals and mandates of both organizations over the next years. There was a request to meet directly with 3 or 4 of our directors, councilors. However, they did propose that some information be provided to us via letter, email to enable the preparation for some discussion points by both organizations to ensure a concise meeting when the time comes. So I think my summary of this is that obviously the Coldell Ag Society is you know, an active and growing actually ag society within the region. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. They're interested in have members interested in the agricultural society and striving to keep agriculture vibrant and visible in the area. And I think this is just their way of reaching out and looking to how they might collaborate with the county. And again, just with some questions as to how council came to the decision to partner with Exhibition Park on the Agri-Food Hub. So I think that's quite easy that we could respond to that. Is that cool? Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Cole. Or sorry, Cole. Go ahead.
Big upgrade today.
Eric.
Yeah.
Let's try that one.
Should we let Cole work on this for now, and should it come to direct meeting, use CAO's discretion, but I think for the most part it can be handled there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Do you want a motion for that, Cole, or are you okay just a direction? Yep. Okay. Moving down, item 3, Iron Springs Water Co-op. We received a letter from the Iron Springs Water Co-op president. Cole, maybe I'll throw right to you on this one and let you speak to this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll defer to our Director of or Public Works, Jeremy Wixon, on the background, but just based on the correspondence, I think that this isn't a governance conversation at this time to come to council. I would recommend that the Iron Springs Co-op meets with administration and public operations, and we can discuss any concerns they may have around the fee structure for service. And then I'll allow Jeremy if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
Yep. Just in addition to that, we have on July 27th, we have not sent out the invites, but we're going to have a open forum with each of the Iron Springs Water Co-op as well as the Lethbridge North County Potable Water Co-op and the County of Lethbridge Regional Water Association, which are informally the North and the South Co-ops. So that is scheduled for the evening of July 27th, and I will be sending out some invites for that after I speak with the chair of that committee, because we have formed now the Water Co-op Liaison Committee recently back in April, I believe, and we held our first meeting here at the first beginning of June to discuss water co-ops going forward.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions or comments from council on that issue? Thank you. If not, we can move down then. Item 4 and item 5 are similar. County of Stettler received we were CC'd on a letter. The County of Stettler declares an agricultural disaster due to drought. And the second item, item 5, County of Paintearth, again, declaring a state of agricultural disaster. Again, Cole and I spoke briefly about this morning.
Yeah, I'll probably defer some of this too, because I know Jeremy's been working on it with our manager of the Ag Service department, and so we do have a little bit of background information pertaining to the qualifications and criteria that would require a state of emergency. So maybe, Jeremy, if you could share Gary's summary.
Yep. Recently I just spoke to Gary Sechrist, our ASB supervisor, this morning in regards to, because we've seen quite a few more of these agricultural disaster letters come across. We would meet the status for dryland acres and rangeland right now to declare a state of ag disaster. Now, the only thing, as in previous discussions we've had, declaring a state of ag disaster really does very little for actually gaining anything for our producers in the area, outside of it just being a publicity piece, essentially.
It's, I mean, ultimately we would defer direction to council. We don't feel that there's a advantage to declaring a state of emergency at this time for any of our ag producers or any impacts to feedstock. But yeah, we have that summary which we can include and distribute based on those findings for the different designations of land. And if you want us to go into more detail, we're more than happy to, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Cole. I'd open it up to, is there any discussion from council? I know this is something that I've been asked on. Last week I did a media availability and I was asked why the county hadn't to this point. Again, I just relayed the fact that there is a certain criteria that has to be met in order to declare that agricultural disaster. Obviously it's on our radar. I know some of us, depending on where you are in the county, are affected more than others. But again, at council's discretion, if this is something we'd like to pursue, I would again open it up to the floor for any comments or any further discussion. Oh, sorry. John, whenever you'd like, John.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the biggest issue behind this is that there is a public misconception that if we do declare an agricultural disaster, that there are some financial benefits of doing so, and I think basically just relaying the message that the only reason for doing it would be more just to bring highlight to the situation. There is no benefit. I really don't see a need to move forward with anything in that regard.
Thanks, John. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe the only advantage to it really is for federal government for this tax if you had to sell off your livestock because you couldn't feed them. But if you don't have a state of emergency, it makes it a little more complex.
Anything else on that one? Go ahead, Eric.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On that point, Lauren, I have no idea if it does help our producers some way or other. I'd be interested in investigating it. We were told at Ag Services last week that there was no benefit whatsoever other than the publicity. So maybe we can investigate that just a little bit to see, and if there is an advantage to some of them, yeah, I'm prepared to support those who need it if there's a net benefit.
We'll bring that back maybe to our next meeting then, Cole? Okay, awesome, thank you. Okay, if there's nothing further on that one, moving down, item 6, Village of Sterling Settler Days invitation, July 15th. We received a letter dated June 22nd, inviting us to Sterling Settlers Days. This year we'll be celebrating on July 14th and 15th, with the parade being on Saturday, July 15th at 11 a.m. Please join our mayor, councilors, and their families Saturday morning with our annual Fireman's Toonie Pancake Breakfast from 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. at the community center. We would like you or your representative to enter a float or decorated car in the parade. Dignitaries are asked to line up on 6th Street. We look forward to seeing you there, and that's under the signature of the Village of Sterling's CAO. Is there any comments or discussion on that one? It is where our parade season is well underway, actually, so anticipate more of these. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Larry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I checked with our communications coordinator, who does a great job planning for the county to participate in the various parades located at urban municipalities within Lethbridge County. Historically, she's not aware of, and I don't recall, I don't know if anyone else may, but that the county has not participated in parades outside of Lethbridge County boundaries. That parade is 9 days away, which isn't very long. The float, incidentally, is available, but maybe would be challenging to find drivers and people who are available 9 days from today, if I did the math right, to participate. So just a bit of background for you. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry.
You're welcome.
Anything from council on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
I think staying within our boundaries other than extraordinary circumstances would probably be a good idea.
Thanks, Eric. And our final item of correspondence, item 7, Village of Barons Council appointments. So there was a by-election held in the Village of Barons. Please be advised that council is apprised of 3 members: Mayor Clinton Bishop, Deputy Mayor Dan Dole, and Councillor Ron Gorzitza. If you have any questions, contact the administrator of the Village of Barons. So congratulations to Mayor Clinton Bishop. I believe that is all for our correspondence. We can move now down in our agenda. Item I, new business. I-1, request to rename Range Road 21-2 to Recovery Road. And Cole, can I throw this to you, or how would you like to deal with this?
Yeah, maybe we'll let John introduce it.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This email was originally forwarded to myself as a result of me attending the grand opening for the Recovery Center on behalf of Lethbridge County, and I got to meet Bruce, so we chatted a little bit about the facility at that time. And then he reached out to me by telephone on the 22nd, and I asked him to send an email so that I could forward it on to council. And what he's asking for here is just a renaming of Range Road 212 to Recovery Road as a token of good gesture and a recognition that the road to recovery for the individuals that are staying at this facility it for me.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, so, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we had some preliminary discussions. The only recommendation or considerations that I would put forward are, one, balancing the gesture for the new facility, and then maybe the perception or future need for these types of facilities. We know that there's a increasing demand for detox type facilities, residents, and so does renaming this section of road open up or imply that future development of that sort is appropriate or applicable in that same area? I can't speak to that or council's opinion there, but I do think it's worth or has merit in consideration to say, if we do rename this, is there an assumption that further development would be appropriate in that general adjacencies or area? So something for consideration.
I'd open it up to council for your thoughts. Any discussion? Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question, if you were to rename it, do you keep it still as Range Road plus the new name, or how does that work for mapping purposes and
Hillary's waving.
With Mike on naming of roads. So when it comes to like naming a road that has an existing, so it's Range Road 2112? 21-2, thank you. Typically when we've had requests for renaming a road, usually it's just an alias. It's not an actual formal renaming of the road, because there's a bunch of other people along that road that have addresses. And that in that particular area, those are addresses as that they get mail from, as from Canada Post. So changing a road name is not just as simple as changing a road name. It impacts all of the people going down that particular roadway. And in that particular area, you're looking at a large number of residences that front onto there. So that's just one thing for council to consider, is that in all likelihood, it would probably just be suitable as an alias, not an actual road name change, because of the implications to other residences. They may have concerns with their road being named something else if they're typically on 21-2. So that's, in the past, how we've done it. We have like Howe Road, we have Brown Road. Those are all aliases. They're not the actual road name. So that's just something that you know, I'm sure by council resolution you can have it as an alias, but not actually going into land titles and saying, oh, we're gonna change this road name so that it's now forever known as this, and that 21-2 kind of disappears. So that's just something to kind of round out that conversation.
Thank you, Hillary. John, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I did discuss with Bruce was that I wasn't even sure this would be a possible or feasible situation, but I think maybe I'd like to make a suggestion that it'd be prudent that we send this back to administration to, take at least a very summary view at it and give us some recommendations rather than trying to figure out whether this is feasible at this point in time. This is more just to bring things onto the radar screen that this request has been put forth, and appreciating that when we're dealing with something like this, there's a significant number of potential unintended consequences. So that has to be addressed. So at this point, I would like to move that we send this back to administration to do this feasibility on this.
Thank you, John. So John has made a motion to direct this matter, the request to rename Range Road 21-2 to Recovery Road, to direct administration to bring back a report to a future council meeting. Is there any further discussion? Does that capture that for you, John?
I would say so, yes.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Mr. Just a clarification, it's not the entire Range Road 21-2. It's just that portion that that's being talked about from the jail road south, because when, in the motion, that would reflect the whole.
Sorry.
Which is.
A portion of.
Yeah, so just a portion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up to that question, do you mean all the way to Highway 4 then, from 512, or?
That's, yeah. That, anyway, I guess it means.
Yeah, okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
My mind is just from 840, or from the jail road to the center itself.
We're happy to investigate based on that motion and come back with some recommendations. We've started that process. I've met with the RCMP to discuss impacts, but it's something I'd like to review with Hillary in more detail, just around what that might look like. And so whether it's all or a section, we'll review some scenarios and come back with more details.
Awesome. Any further discussion on that? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. And our final item on our agenda today, item J, County Council and Committee updates. J1, the 2023 Bursary Award.
So I'm doing it.
And with that, I will throw to Councillor Hickey. Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this was a very interesting exercise this year. The applicants were unbelievable. The quality of both their education and their marks, and their commitment to the community was just top notch. It was a difficult decision. We did go through though, and we picked 3 people: Abigail Jaquetta, Ilana I'll say this name, right? Vukaravich, and and Emma Rurik. They all easily fit into the categories of the scholarship, and we feel that they are the top of the cream. It was just, but there were so many people so right up there. It was unbelievable.
Thank you, Lauren. I'd open it up to John or Mark. Anything you'd like to add from the committee?
I'd just say thanks to the council for adding another scholarship this year, and then bumping it to $1,500. Last year we had a good selection. This year it got even better, and it was a tough decision, but it was a consensus by the end of it. We all agreed, and it was pretty clear. So thanks to Jen for all the work she's done in putting it together. There's lots of background work, but yeah, if this keeps improving, it's a great look in the county, and it really supports our residents and the kids going through education after they get out of high school.
Thank you, Mark. John?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would reiterate what both Councillor Hickey and Sayers have said. It's one of those processes that you go through that it's tough to make a decision, but I find it very rewarding going through it and reviewing it and seeing the high caliber of applicants that we have. And I'm really encouraged by the fact that we're seeing more applicants every year. And as a result of that, I would like to see a way forward that maybe we can expand this a little bit. If we continue to see the caliber that we have and the quantity of applications that we have, and I would like to congratulate the 3 individuals and look forward to them going on to their post-secondary education and having continued success. So, and that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Jen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just add, we will invite the recipients to the August meeting for a presentation from council for the bursary awards.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. We have a recommendation before us. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Lauren?
I would be happy to move the recommendation to nominate the 3 individuals which we had mentioned before, as per the policies of 182.
Thank you, Lauren. Lauren has moved the recommendation. The County Council awards the 2023 bursary in the amount of $1,500 each to be presented at the County Council meeting on August 3rd, 2023 to the following recipients, and I will, please forgive me for butchering these names, but Abigail Jaquetta, Elena Vukurovich, and Emma Ruring. So congratulations to those three. Thank you for everyone for applying. Thank you to staff and to council for making sure that this is pushed out there and making sure it's visible to people. Thanks again to our Director of Finance Administration, Jennifer Place, for all the work that goes on behind the scenes, presenting this to council or to the committee. And then thank you to Lauren, Mark, and John on the committee for making these selections. It's greatly appreciated, and like Mark and everyone said, it's very encouraging and look forward to the future. So thank you for that. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. And if there is nothing further?
Now we have a problem.
Okay. Mark has moved to adjourn our meeting today at 11:02 a.m. Thank you very much to staff and to council. John, if you could just stay on for a couple minutes, we're going to have a quick talk afterwards, if that's all right. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for today's meeting. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.